I'm pregnant with my boss's baby. Will you divorce him soon? The woman who is right in front of me is just 22 years old. She deliberately clings to her boss, my husband's arm, and looks at me with a sneering smile, leaving me with nothing but a sigh. My husband, who claimed to be busy with work and hardly ever came home, preferred to be out on business. Little did I know, he wasn't doing it for the staff but to have time for his affair, and I feel terrible for the employees. Seeing that I don't respond, the young woman beams with a victorious smile. Well, it must be shocking, huh? To have your husband, who makes $2 million a year, taken away. But it's not your fault, dear. After all, there's a huge age difference between you and me. Of course he'd choose me over someone like you. I'm his wife from today, so you just live within your means, please. She infuriates me to talk like that, but something else bothers me more. A salary of $2 million, whose story is that? The woman looks at me quizzically. Apparently she thought my husband earns that much. Glancing at my husband, his complexion visibly worsens. I can guess what he's been telling her, and I face her with the brightest smile I can muster. You know, that person is. I'm Alexandra, 50 years old. I met my husband Ralph, also 50, through a friend's introduction, and we got married. After marriage, we started a company together, struggling but supporting each other, and now we've grown enough to employ staff. Being busy delayed our marriage, and we don't have children, but we live fulfilling days nonetheless. However, lately, while it's good to be busy, it's natural to feel more tired than when younger, and I continue working despite thinking my body aches here and there. My husband is probably the same, but if I can see his hard-working attitude and efforts for the company, I might manage to say a kind word or two to him daily. But I don't feel any sincere effort from him towards work. Today, as soon as he came home, he laid down on the sofa and started lounging while watching TV, which is simply frustrating. Whenever he comes home, all he does is complain about this and that hurting. He acts like I should listen to him just because he claims he works more than I do. Hey, beer. He starts again today. Just get it yourself. I'm working on the materials for tomorrow's meeting. He sighs exaggeratedly and opens the fridge. Really, doesn't someone know how to care for her husband? A wife should support her husband. Just listen to me and you might seem a bit more charming. At the beginning of our marriage, we spent more money on ourselves since we had no children, eating at upscale restaurants and giddily dating, thinking we would always be happy together. Now, you're bringing work home and showing off to me like you're so reliable at the company. He taunts me today, irritating me and quickly going to bed to live as he pleases. Especially recently, it's obvious that he's not really invested in his work. My husband likes to appear committed and says he's unmatched in dedication to the company, but it's all talk. In a room full of employees, he becomes arrogant and assigns menial tasks based on favoritism, not capability. They can't complain to him. Even if I wanted to discuss it with someone higher up, I wouldn't know who to turn to about my husband, who spouts high and mighty theories every day as the representative of our company. At this rate, it's only a matter of time before the employees are crushed. He claims different jurisdiction or that it's his case whenever I try to intervene, but I can't just ignore the seeds of unrest within the company. I don't want to bring work discussions home, but the only time I can catch my husband at home and not run away is after dinner. While cleaning up after dinner, I started the conversation. Honey, haven't your attitudes towards the employees been a bit harsh lately? What are you talking about? He asks, watching TV. It looks like you're just making them do your job. My husband sighs deeply. The company's performance has started to decline, and I'm trying to start a new project to contribute a bit to the company, and that's how you talk to me? He muttered sarcastically. A new project? What are you talking about? I haven't heard anything about that. Because you and the other employees aren't doing anything, I have to move. I'm not dumping work on them, I just don't have enough time for the new project, so I'm asking for help. He said without even looking at me. You're saying it's bad attitudes towards them, or pushing work onto them. Someone like me who cares about the company is really getting tired of your nagging. It seems he really didn't appreciate being corrected by me.
What you're doing is just dumping responsibilities. Do you think they can just say no to you? If you're going to ask for something, are you doing anything to cover their workload, or anything at all? If not, they're just getting more work and can't handle it.
Okay, I get it.
You're such a nag.
Ralph went to his room, clearly annoyed. After that, he just showed up at the company without actually seeming to work, which only increased the frustration among both me and the employees. Fed up, I forced some time in the office to confront him, and he would work seriously for about an hour. But soon, he'd just revert to continuously messing with his smartphone, showing no real signs of engagement. The employees probably have a lot to say, but with me being his wife, they feel they can't speak up. I had no choice but to urgently address Ralph and cover for the employees. Watching this, Ralph seemed to think I was beneath him, showing no signs of wanting to improve. We had agreed to decide company policies together. Yet he keeps bringing up new projects I've never even heard about. If the performance is declining, identifying the causes and finding solutions should be our priority. Despite my efforts in this direction, Ralph keeps meddling, preventing our company from recovering. I argued that investing in new projects without the ability to recover costs was far too risky given our current financial situation, but he wouldn't listen and even suggested we stop discussing his actions altogether. Lately, when he comes home late and I remark, "You're home late," he responds grumpily, "I was meeting with a client." But it's too frequent. When I ask where these clients are, he answers, but it seems he's not just going for meals but also visiting places with women. He keeps saying write it off as an expense, but it's impossible to justify that when I don't even know who he was with, which project it was for, or how many people were involved. When I confront him, he just says it's for the future or for a valuable customer, but never gives any specific names. On top of that, he claims, as long as there's a receipt, it should be fine. One day, when I was out on business, I saw my husband in a cafe. Was he gathering documents? No, knowing that man. Using work as an excuse, I was sure he was probably slacking off again, which was frustrating. As I approached the cafe to confront my husband, I noticed another figure seated by the window. It looked like he was sharing a table with someone. Upon closer inspection, it was a woman, and a considerably young one at that. I didn't recognize her. She definitely wasn't one of our employees or from a company we work with. Who could she be meeting with during work hours? Could she be the client my husband mentioned? She didn't seem like someone who would frequent a nightclub, and I doubted if someone her age could handle such responsibilities. Judging people by their appearance or age is not right. Moreover, I realize I've been too harsh on my husband lately due to his recent actions. I wondered if she might be his affair partner, considering how little trust one had in him now. But perhaps he was trying to change the company in his own way. I decided it was time to have a proper discussion with my husband, something we hadn't done in a while. Perhaps there were things he couldn't consult with me about because of how I had been. Leaving the scene, I headed to the next sales office. Later at home, I dined with my husband.
By the way, I heard you were out on business today. Was it about the new project?
Yeah, something like that. He replied, seemingly indifferent.
I saw you at the cafe at noon. That woman, is she someone from the client's side?
Were you spying on me? He asked, his tone clearly annoyed as he stopped eating.
Spying? What are you talking about? I just thought I should greet her if she's a client. Is she coming to our office sometime soon, or is there something fishy going on that I should know about?
He glared at me. What do you mean by fishy?
That girl was someone I was interviewing to be involved in the new project.
Interview? I haven't heard anything about that.
It was sudden.
I don't need to report everything to you.
Who is she? Is she a staff member, a part-timer? What employment conditions did you tell her?
Why do I have to tell you all that?
If you think there's something shady going on, then keep thinking that. I can't be bothered with such trivial suspicions.
You can't decide on hiring alone.
We have enough staff, and the budget is tight, so we decided on no new hires this year. You're just overturning that decision. She must be very talented, right? I'd like to know who she is.
He stood up from his chair, his face clearly showing his annoyance, barely glancing at me.
Are you actually having an affair?
I couldn't hold back any longer, but he said nothing and just went to his room. A few days later, during the morning assembly, my husband announced that there was a visitor interested in touring the company. With a broad smile, he opened the door, and there stood the young woman I had seen in the cafe. She just graduated from college recently. Please, everyone, give her a warm welcome. He said that. As I looked around, the employees were all tilting their heads with puzzled looks. Seemingly they thought I was aware of her visit. I had not been informed about any of this, and her suddenly showing up for a tour was completely out of the blue. I approached my husband and the student. What's your name? I'm Monica.
Monica, thank you for coming. I wasn't aware of this tour due to a communication breakdown with the staff, and I'm sorry it's difficult to accommodate you today. May I contact you later to reschedule? I'm sorry for coming all of a sudden,
Monica said, hiding behind my husband. She clutched the hem of my husband's jacket as if to say she hadn't done anything wrong yet felt scolded. My husband told Monica not to worry and sent her home, then he sat at his desk looking displeased. May I have a word? I called him into the conference room and pressed him about Monica.
Look, suddenly bringing someone for a tour without consulting anyone is troublesome. And what were you thinking about not discussing it with anyone?
What's with you?
You act nice to Monica and then lecture me. It's just a company tour. Don't make such a fuss over it. Just a tour? What if she talks about what she saw here to someone? We have lots of client information here. If we're doing tours, important stuff should be kept out of sight, and she should have a guide.
Even as I questioned his lack of crisis management, my husband seemed unconcerned. He kept a cool face and quietly left the conference room. Seeing how familiarly my husband called Monica and defended her, I grew more suspicious that he was having an affair with her. Afterwards, I asked my husband, what happened to Monica? He told me that she had graduated from college, but he doesn't know anything about her since then. He didn't want to talk about it anymore. The talk of the new project that he had been boasting about also ceased after Monica's visit. It seems like he was just using it as an excuse to meet Monica, and now that things seem to be going well with her, he probably doesn't care about the company anymore. Then why bring her to the company at all? If it was just to meet up, he could have just called it business rounds without making up excuses about new projects. Moreover, by bringing her to the company, all the employees now know about Monica. I couldn't understand what my husband wanted to do. Lately, he has been leaving work on time and is the first to leave the company. He doesn't come home and often doesn't return until the next day. On the rare occasion Ralph was home, he was watching TV and drinking, visibly frowning when I arrived.
You're home early today.
Yeah, I finished work early, Ralph replied, sounding annoyed. Shower, he said, heading to the bathroom. I noticed his phone left on the table. As I was putting away groceries, unconcerned, the phone started ringing. It seemed to be his phone ringing on the table. The caller ID showed Monica's name. After the call dropped and rang again, my husband came out of the bathroom, picked up his phone, and glared at me.
Don't you dare look at my phone! Don't you know the word privacy, you shameless woman?
With that, he went to his room. From my husband's room, I could hear what sounded like his conversation with Monica. He was laughing loudly, saying things like, "That noisy woman at home," and "I want to break up and be with Monica soon." Unexpectedly catching proof of infidelity, I pondered what to do next. After a brief pause, I knocked on my husband Ralph's door. "I'd like to meet with both you and Monica. Let's have a talk," I called out to him. He seemed thrilled on the phone, still talking to Monica, as he asked her to check her schedule. After hanging up with Monica, Ralph smugly declared, "I've decided to divorce you and marry Monica. Nothing you say will change that." Monica then arrived at the house over the weekend, brimming with confidence. She looked around the house with a smug grin and said,
"So this is where you guys live?"
"Well, until now." As if the divorce was already settled, I sat Monica at the table and served her coffee. Ralph quickly came out with the divorce papers and urged me to sign. Monica looked at me triumphantly, as if proud to be the one Ralph chose, while implying I was being discarded.
"Come on, hurry up and sign the divorce papers,"
she taunted provocatively. Disgusted with both Ralph and Monica, I signed the divorce papers. From that day, Ralph stopped coming home. It was a while later when Monica contacted me, saying, "We got married." Out of the blue, she called. "Ralph and I are expecting a baby. I'm the celebrity wife now," she said, laughing crudely over the phone.
"You must be so bitter you can't even speak."
"Well, of course. You're walking into a bleak future, having divorced a husband with a $2 million salary, the former CEO's wife. So sad I might cry.
Should I give you a little charity?"
"It must be for the money. Otherwise, why would such a young woman approach my husband who isn't particularly handsome or talented?" Ralph was clearly smitten by the attention from a younger woman. But Monica seemed to be misunderstanding something.
"Oh, the one with a $2 million salary?
That's me, the CEO.
He was just the CEO's husband and a board member because of me, but now that we're divorced, he's no longer on the board. So, you better brace yourself because that celebrity wife lifestyle isn't going to happen."
I said over the phone. Monica was momentarily speechless. Then after a pause, she shouted back,
"Huh? What's that? I won't forgive such lies. You old hag."
With that, Monica hung up the phone. Immediately after, Ralph called me.
"What did you tell Monica?"
It seemed Monica had confronted him.
"I just told her the truth. I'm the CEO, and since he's off the board, his salary will plummet. I advised her that a celebrity lifestyle isn't possible."
Ralph was even angrier, but I felt it served him right. It's his fault for lying in the first place. Then I hung up. The next day, Ralph and Monica stormed into the company. Still furious, Monica marched right up to me without a care for the other employees' stares.
"From now on, my husband is the CEO. You're out."
They must have thought that once Ralph became CEO, the $2 million salary would be theirs. Ralph boldly proclaimed, "Even if you leave, all the employees will follow me. After all, I'm better at work and more popular than you." But while he bragged loudly, the employees had only been polite because he was the CEO's husband, and they saw him slack off at work and ultimately cheat with a college student and get divorced, so their glances were cold. Who would want to follow such a man to the top of the company? Despite the employees' icy looks, Ralph yelled at me and Monica egged him on even more, shouting, "Hurry up and hand over the company to him." I thought our divorce would finally sever our ties, but they were still clinging on. Talking to them seemed futile, but as the CEO, I had a duty to protect the company and its employees.
"Both of you need to calm down. It's unseemly for adults to be shouting like this. And Monica, you were the one who misunderstood that my husband was the CEO, weren't you?"
Monica aggressively approached me with an even louder voice.
"Huh? I don't care about that. Just hand over the company to me, that's all."
Monica kept lashing out at me, refusing to back down. Just as she seemed about to physically attack me, one of the employees stepped between us.
"Enough already. If you keep this up, I'm calling the police."
Following that employee, others quickly intervened between Monica and me.
"If you do anything to the CEO, we won't forgive you. Annoying. Get out."
Pushed back by the employee's menacing stance, Monica retreated. Surprisingly, the employees who had been subdued in their behavior towards Ralph, now that we were divorced, suddenly changed their demeanor, much to his astonishment. They had only been enduring it because he was my husband. If I had just resigned myself to saying, "He's just my husband," I wouldn't have this support now.
"What are you doing? Don't come near me. I am the CEO's wife. I'll fire all of you."
Well, you can't just change the CEO overnight.
And even if you became the CEO's wife, it doesn't mean you get control over personnel.
Despite my words, Monica continued to scream. In contrast, Ralph stood next to her, looking utterly stunned. It seems he was significantly affected by being viewed with disgust by the employees. Or maybe he was overwhelmed by Monica's foul tirade. Breathing heavily from her rant, Monica must have realized she wouldn't get the future she had envisioned. Ignoring the dazed Ralph, she stormed out of the company. Ralph looked at me in shock, then, with a jerk of his chin, he hastily followed her out. After driving out the troublesome duo, I went around and apologized to each employee. Afterward, Ralph and Monica's relationship deteriorated. Ralph says he won't divorce because they have a child, while Monica is demanding a divorce, leading to fierce arguments between them. Perhaps frightened by the fact that I am the CEO, Ralph and Monica started fighting with each other. They freely accuse each other and now seem to be considering taking legal action against one another. Honestly, I didn't care how much they fought or how messy it got. The idea that everything they did to me would just disappear because it was convenient for them was unthinkable. But they lashed out at me, overwhelmed with their own issues. "How dare you? It's all your fault, you're to blame," Ralph ranted, but it just sounded like the howling of a loser. After involving a lawyer, Ralph quickly became quiet. Despite his previously bold attitude, he turned meek as soon as a lawyer got involved, a small man indeed. Ralph and Monica seemed to go back and forth about divorcing for a long time, but eventually, they did divorce. And here's where the story gets both interesting and ridiculous. It turns out Monica's child wasn't Ralph's. Calculating back from the birth, she was pregnant before meeting Ralph, and the real father's identity was unknown. It seems Monica was planning to claim the child was Ralph's to get child support. Knowing this, Ralph and Monica's situation got even messier. You would think he'd understand with a little thought, but Ralph truly believed the child was his. Monica hoped to at least get child support from Ralph, but since he wasn't the father and they hadn't been together long, that was impossible. Monica reluctantly returned to her parents' home, but her parents, being very strict, argued with her after learning of her past actions. They reportedly told her, "Leave the child and get out, and never show up again." Monica cried and clung to her parents, begging, "Please let me stay at home, I will reflect on my actions." Reluctantly, her parents agreed, saying, "The child is innocent." It seems unlikely that Monica will regain trust, and she is reportedly being re-educated from scratch. Despite potentially being cut ties, Monica has returned to her parents' home because she has a child, and they are helping her with childcare. Considering what she has done to me, this punishment seems rather lenient. If left to her own devices, she is likely to cause unbelievable trouble again. She seems to be someone who doesn't understand the meaning of repentance. In that sense, perhaps it's best for her to live under the strict control of her parents for life. Given Monica's character, even under strict parents, her nature is unlikely to change, and she will probably struggle throughout her life, which feels like just deserts. Blinded by money, she approached Ralph claiming it was his child, hoping to lead a comfortable life, but look how that turned out, it's laughable. After their divorce, Ralph and Monica rented a new place, opting for a high-rise condo beyond their means, which led to them being unable to afford the rent. Ralph had been spending a lot on Monica during their affair, flaunting wealth by wearing expensive clothes and driving luxury cars, all funded by loans from financial companies. Moreover, these loans were at high interest rates, leading to severe debt, plunging further into debt. Drowning in debt and unable to quit his job despite causing so many problems, Ralph was still at my company, but he could only handle menial tasks and became nothing but a nuisance, facing increasingly harsh criticism. Eventually, unable to bear it any longer, he resigned on his own. Ralph lost his home, job, wife, everything. Later, I heard from a company employee that Ralph was seen living on the streets, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Alone in the house Ralph had left, I opened a can of beer. It was my time now, free from anyone's control. Imagining Ralph living on the streets, I couldn't stop laughing again. Serve him right. Though I have savings, a thriving business, and no financial worries, divorcing from Ralph was particularly satisfying. Thinking back to when I thought I'd have to endure life with him, it sends shivers down my spine. I finished my beer and went to bed. It felt as if all the fatigue and aches I had been feeling had eased. Now, without the stress Ralph caused, both my employees and I can work more freely. Afterward, with the support of employees who trust and support me, I launched a new venture, and now the company has grown even larger, making every day feel fulfilling. I'm not exactly pretty-faced, and to be blunt, I'm overweight. Yet, despite this, a man married me, a man I genuinely loved. Now that I'm pregnant, he told me, "I hate poor people like you. I'm gonna divorce you, a fat and ugly woman like you. Raise the child in your belly on your own." I can't believe he said such hurtful things to me. I wonder how he could say that to me. My name is Catherine. Growing up, I was never the center of attention, always in the quieter groups. To be honest, I've always been on the heavier side, and I'm well aware I don't have a traditionally cute face. So, I never really had admirers. But, surprisingly, I was quite athletic in school and was one of the top performers during PE. The female gym teacher would often compliment me, saying, "Catherine, you're so flexible and healthy. Your skin even glows more than anyone else's." I suppose being top-notch in PE was the only area where I could shine. And having a gym teacher notice that made me incredibly happy. After high school, I chose to attend a beauty and health vocational school. I genuinely enjoyed learning about makeup techniques, body mechanics, and how to maintain good posture. I was among the top students. And I felt this was my calling. Eventually, I found a job at a spa that offered massages. It wasn't a big company, and the pay wasn't great. But I felt a sense of purpose, and many clients requested me. The spa wasn't exclusively for women, men could also get oil massages and relaxation massages. One of the male clients was Bob. Bob once said, after one of my massages, "You're really good. I don't think I can get a massage from anyone but you." He praised me a lot. He even advised, "Why not spread your skills more? You're that good." It felt great to be complimented on something I'm confident in, so I naturally developed feelings for him. I mean, anyone can do what I do. "But yeah, I trained all the staff here." I replied modestly, but deep down, I was falling for Bob. Perhaps he sensed my feelings. Because he eventually asked me out. Bob knew many trendy places, and he was fun to talk to. Being with him always lifted my spirits, and I started thinking of marriage. And maybe he sensed that too. Because he proposed, and we got married. It felt like the peak of my life. I mean, I never stood out in school, wasn't particularly pretty, and was overweight. Because of that, I never experienced being popular or sought after. Yet, I was able to marry such a wonderful man. We rented a small apartment and began our life as a married couple. I imagined a future filled with endless smiles and happiness. I would even daydream to that extent. But those hopes were too idealistic. The times of such joyful smiles didn't last very long. My sister became the source of trouble in our marriage. Yes, I have an older sister named Rachel. Rachel was the opposite of me, pretty and with a great figure. She was always popular with the boys in school, and she's dated so many that I doubt she can even keep track. But to be honest, I never really liked Rachel. She always looked down on me because of our contrasting appearances. "Catherine, look at this dress. Isn't it cute? You should try wearing something like this." "Oh, but I doubt it'd fit you. The dress would probably feel so sorry," she teased, laughing. Another time, she said, "Oh my, someone confessed their feelings to me again, even though I told them I have a boyfriend. I must be super attractive. Catherine, you're lucky, you probably don't have such problems, right?" She would often make these annoying remarks. But I couldn't retort because Rachel wasn't wrong. I'd always hoped to avoid her as much as possible since she was always like this. But suddenly, Rachel started visiting the apartment where Bob and I lived. It was right around the time when I found out I was pregnant. Unexpectedly, Rachel said with sincerity.
Catherine, you're pregnant? Congratulations.
Hearing that, I was a bit shocked. Maybe her perspective changed since I got married. My feelings of surprise turned to joy. However, I felt a bit off shortly after. After looking around our place, she asked, "Is Bob not home today?" I thoughtlessly told her he was at work, but she kept talking about him. "So, what's Bob like? Does he get weekends off? Where do you guys usually go for dates?" I was bombarded with questions. I felt she spent more time talking about that than my pregnancy. It started to bring back all the negative feelings I had about her, but she just asked her questions and then left. The short interaction left me feeling drained. But after that, almost every weekend, Rachel started coming over. Bob was home on weekends, and initially, Rachel was all smiles and greeted him.
Bob, you're gonna be a dad soon. Congratulations.
But, as her visits became frequent, she began to focus her attention solely on Bob, barely acknowledging me. Moreover, she started showing up in stylish clothes she usually wouldn't wear. I've never been much of a catch, but after all, I'm still a woman. I could see through Rachel's intentions. She was definitely coming to see Bob. It was evident from the way her voice and expressions became more feminine around him. Despite my growing discomfort, the bond between them seemed to be strengthening. I had always believed that Bob wouldn't fall for someone like Rachel, especially now that he's my husband. But as time passed, I began to feel an unsettling atmosphere, like my trust in him was being eroded. While Rachel and Bob's relationship appeared to grow closer, Bob's attitude towards me seemed to be cooling. Usually, when he'd come home from work, he'd say with a bright voice,
"I'm home. I've had a long day and can't wait to eat your cooking."
And during dinner, he'd praise,
"This is so delicious. I'm so lucky to eat your cooking every day."
However, a few weeks after Rachel started visiting, those kind words vanished. Instead of his usual demeanor, when Bob came home from work, he'd sigh and grumble. "Man, today was exhausting. Why on earth does the boss talk so darn long?" And during dinner, he started to complain. "I really wanted to eat some meat today. This isn't filling at all." I felt increasingly lonely and finally confronted Bob. "Hey, have you been irritated lately? Why does every day seem so miserable to you?" To my surprise, Bob shot me an angry glare. Something I hadn't seen even when we were dating.
"What? I don't want to hear that from you. You don't understand anything. After all, you just work some slow-paced job and earn peanuts."
His words felt harsh, almost like verbal abuse. I was deeply hurt, on the verge of tears. I never wanted to fight, but I couldn't stay silent either. "I don't work slowly, and my salary isn't that low." Before I could say more, Bob cut me off.
"That's enough. I'm gonna take a bath and then hit the hay."
And with that, he headed straight to the bathroom. From then on, Bob often came home late and was constantly on his phone when he was home. I had a growing sense of unease. Especially since I was nearly 7 months pregnant. I didn't want to think negatively, but there were things I couldn't help but wonder about. One day, I gently prodded. "Rachel hasn't been around lately, has she?" Indeed. Rachel, who used to visit almost weekly, had suddenly stopped coming. However, Bob nonchalantly replied, "Who knows? Rachel lives in the next town over. If we wanted to see her, we could any time." This response alarmed me. I had never mentioned that Rachel lived in the neighboring town. Moreover, Rachel had just moved there barely a month ago. By that time, she had already stopped coming to our apartment. Unable to contain my suspicions any longer, I blurted out,
"How do you know Rachel lives in the next town? Are you hiding something with her? It sure seems like it."
I finally blurted it out clearly. It was clear how much Bob meant to me, which is why I expressed myself so emotionally. I expressed my feelings so strongly just because I wanted to convey how I felt. But Bob seemed indifferent. Instead, he smirked and said, all right, I get it.
If you're gonna be this way, we should just break up. Honestly, I'm not into women who've put on weight like you. And with your low earnings, life ain't fun. I don't like being poor. Divorce might be our only option. I was overwhelmed with shock, anger, and sadness. Especially with our baby on the way.
That's so cruel. What about our child?
In rapid succession, he retorted. Raise the kid by yourself. I'm not gonna be that child's father anymore. Look, I like beautiful women with great figures like Rachel. I've decided to marry Rachel once I divorce you. So, you're useless to me now. I married you because you were good at massages and seemed like you'd handle the housework, but I'm over it. He was just going off. I couldn't even get a word in. But being told such blunt truths made me change my feelings instantly. There's no point being with this man anymore. Actually, I realized I didn't want to be. Surely, Bob and Rachel had something going on. With my feelings completely cooled, I told him. All right, let's break up then. Take care. Then, I handed him the business card of the divorce attorney I had prepared, foreseeing this situation. Wow, you're quick. I can divorce you right away with this. Once it's finalized, I might just head over to Rachel's place. You can keep living your broke life. Bob was all excited as he took the business card, but if he truly planned on marrying Rachel, that excitement would probably fade pretty quickly, wouldn't it? But he didn't seem to realize that yet. So, I immediately started preparing to move out. I quickly secured a new place and decided to live there for a while. My belly was starting to show, and I was thinking of taking a break from work. About a month after I left our home, my phone rang one day. It was Bob. Even if I didn't answer, I knew what he wanted. Still, I picked up to settle things. His voice was frantic.
Hey, where are you? Do something, come on.
I calmly responded. I'm in one of the new luxury condos. It's spacious, has a great view, it's perfect. There was a pause from Bob.
What? How can someone broke like you afford such a place?
He'd probably think that way, wouldn't he? After all, he just assumed I was broke without knowing the whole story. But to be clear. Why? Because I have around $700,000 in savings. And my monthly income is around $50,000. He probably wouldn't believe it, but it was true. What I mean is, sure, the income from treatments at that workplace alone might not have been that much. However, the truth is, I was actually allowed to have a side job within that workplace. I taught remote massage classes online. At the workplace, I became an instructor, teaching beauty and health courses, including massage techniques. Initially, the spa owner appreciated my skills and knowledge, suggesting I try it. The staff at the same workplace also acknowledged that they improved faster thanks to my teachings. However, in the beginning, there wasn't much in terms of results. It was probably like that when I first started dating Bob too. Things changed, and now I have about 2,000 students nationwide. With a $50 membership fee, I made $100,000 monthly. I got half of it, so my share was really $50,000. When I told Bob this, he shouted,
Why didn't you tell me sooner? We wouldn't have divorced. And we could have lived in a better house.
Too little, too late. He had always seen me as just a housemaid good for chores and massages. He'd always assumed I didn't earn much. Regarding the house choice with Bob, I told him, I was matching your income level. After all, we agreed to split living expenses. So, if you're calling that a poor lifestyle, doesn't that mean your income isn't that great to begin with? I made sure to say it plainly. And, to twist the knife further, I added sarcastically. But, are you happy now that you married Rachel? I heard, you two really did get hitched. Congratulations. The reason this stings is because he must be facing hefty financial demands.
What the hell? I'm not happy at all. And what's this alimony about?
Indeed, I had consulted with a private investigator about Bob even before our divorce. So, after our divorce, I received evidence of him cheating with Rachel.
So, I tried claiming compensation for emotional distress. But the tragedy doesn't end there for Bob. Turns out, Rachel had a significant debt, and she was making Bob pay for it. Rachel always attracted a lot of attention, and she was notorious for her affairs. Furthermore, Rachel had previously been through a divorce. The reason for their separation was Rachel's infidelity. Consequently, she had been charged with child support and property division due to that divorce. To cover these payments, Rachel had already accumulated a significant amount of debt. I was, of course, aware of this. Now, the situation is a reflection of Bob's decision to marry such a woman. Moreover, I'll also be claiming child support for the baby I'm carrying. So, with our divorce, Bob now faces a slew of hefty payments and has started a life burdened with debt. When I explained all this, Bob exclaimed,
Hey, the baby in your belly is mine, right? A child needs a father. Right, Catherine?
But who was the one who cruelly called me ugly and fat? Now, it's too late for such remarks, and there's no way I'm going to accommodate him. If you need money, why not spread your skills to everyone? You told me, remember? That everyone would benefit from Catherine's expertise. I took that advice and look where I am now. You should do the same. I suggested. It's pretty ironic, really. Because even though he was the one who suggested it, I was the one who acted on his advice, earning a high income. He neglected to notice my growing income and rashly labeled me as poor and then discarded me. Now, he's the one leading a life of poverty. Nowadays, Rachel keeps telling him,
What's wrong with you? I thought you were a capable man, but you're nothing but common folk. Work harder and earn more money. You're just a man to repay my debts.
Come to think of it, when Rachel asked about Bob in the past, I thought it would be best to speak slightly favorably of him, so maybe I embellished the truth a bit. But all things considered, since both have similar life stories and ended up together, maybe they should just figure things out together. That's what I conveyed before ending the call. Nowadays, Bob is working day and night, juggling his main job and side jobs, trying to repay the massive debt he's incurred. All while Rachel, his wife, doesn't seem to be working earnestly at all. It's a living nightmare. Well, can't be helped. Bob not only abandoned me, but also the child in my womb. It's only fitting as a punishment. On the other hand, a couple of months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. While he's been dealt the card of not having a father, my parents and my workplace's owner have been supportive, and the child is growing up well. The initial months of raising a child meant I couldn't engage in any work-related activities, but fortunately, I had savings. Unexpectedly, even after my temporary retirement, my archived instructional videos kept generating steady income. Thanks to that, my child and I are leading a comfortable life.
Shut them up, now. They are so loud.
I was happily living with my husband and my sweet mother-in-law, but things changed after our daughter was born. Our daughter cried at night, and I started getting yelled at and treated coldly. One day, while my husband was swamped with work at home, our suddenly crying daughter went silent in just the brief moment I looked away. But she wasn't just sleeping. She woke up convulsing. After taking her to the emergency room and hearing the doctor's diagnosis, I decided to get a divorce. My name is Michelle Stevens. I'm a 28-year-old stay-at-home mom. I live with my husband, John, our daughter, Emily, and my mother-in-law, making it a family of 4. I met John 6 years ago at my former job. We were hired at the same time and worked in the same department. From the beginning, I was impressed with his innovative ideas, which didn't seem like they came from someone who started at the same time as me. I was curious about what kind of person he was. He was different from our colleagues. He seemed a bit odd and kept to himself. But when I approached him, I realized he was an interesting guy, though a bit unique. For example, because he loves his job and constantly thinks of new ideas, he has a routine meal plan to avoid deciding what to eat for lunch. It's like, Monday is curry, Tuesday is ramen, Wednesday is grilled fish, and so on. So it wasn't that he didn't like spending time with colleagues, but he ate alone to stick to his routine. All I had to do was adjust my lunch schedule to his, and spending time with him became easy. Though we often talked about work when we were together, I learned a lot, and I enjoyed our conversations. He had some other quirks because he's so dedicated to his job, but I found them endearing. I was the one who confessed my feelings and said, "Let's date." He laughed and replied, "I was gonna ask you out soon." Our relationship didn't change much after we started dating. We didn't go on typical romantic dates. Instead, we often ate lunch together and discussed our work projects. However, for the first time since we began dating, he introduced me to his mother. He didn't like spending time on household chores because it took away from his work, so he lived with his mother. From what I heard, his family background was complicated. His parents divorced when he was 10. John stayed with his mother, and his younger sister, who was just a baby, went with their father. He hadn't had any contact with his father or sister since then. I was bracing myself for a very protective mother, but when I met her, she was a wonderful person. Unlike the reserved John, she was talkative and cheerful. She treated me just as warmly as she did her son. Sometimes when John was too busy with work, she and I would go out together. I got along really well with both John and his mother. 3 years into our relationship, after John proposed, his mother jokingly said, "If John's getting married, I guess I should move out." To which I eagerly replied, "I'd be upset if you did. Living with you is one of the reasons I said yes to the proposal. If you're okay with it, please stay with us." She laughed and said, "You sure about that? I might be hard on you." I laughed it off, saying, "Bring it on." John, watching us, laughed too. For the next 2 years, we lived together without any problems. She took care of all the household chores for John and me, who were both working. Even when I offered to help, she would say, "You must be tired, let me handle it," and she'd do everything herself. Occasionally, on weekends when John was busy working from home, she and I would cook or bake together, which was always fun. John remained dedicated to his job even after we got married. I believe our home was cheerful thanks to his mother, and I was grateful for that. Things started to change when I discovered I was pregnant. 2 years into our marriage, I felt unwell, and at the advice of John's mother, I went to a doctor, who confirmed my pregnancy. John was thrilled when I told him, but his mother's reaction was lukewarm. Considering how she always rejoiced in our happy moments more than we did, I sensed something was amiss. That night, in our bedroom, I asked John about it. He explained, Mom, she had postpartum depression after my sister was born. Dad was working in a different city at the time, so she had to take care of both of us by herself. It must have been tough. One day, she left the house with just me. I haven't seen my sister or dad since then. I regretted being so thoughtless and hurting her feelings. I didn't know there was such a backstory. If I'd known, I would have told John first and thought more about how to break the news to her. Seeing my disappointment, John smiled and said, "It's been almost 20 years since then. She'll be fine." Just as my husband said, my mother-in-law didn't change a bit from the next day onward. If anything, she became even more concerned about my health, preparing meals with even more attention to ensure I was getting all the necessary nutrients, and accompanying me to the hospital in my husband's place among many other things. Feeling reassured by her, I decided to give birth here instead of going back to my parents' house. Initially, I had thought about having the baby at my parents' house, but it was in the countryside and quite far away, so the idea of looking for a hospital there and preparing to go back seemed like too much of a hassle. Luckily, my mother-in-law said, "I'll help you out," and I was able to give birth safely. I think I will never forget the moment my daughter, Emily, was born. She had already been precious to me while in my belly, but the moment I saw her face for the first time, I felt an overwhelming surge of affection and could unconditionally vow to protect her no matter what, and make her happy. Both my husband and my mother-in-law were happy about Emily's birth, and I think that was the happiest time of my life. However, that happiness gradually started to crumble. After bringing Emily home from the hospital, I took a year-long maternity leave, thinking that I would help with childcare and household chores. But my mother-in-law said, "I've always taken care of the house, and that's not going to change. You don't need to worry about it." True to her word, she took care of various things around the house as she always did, but she wouldn't get involved with Emily. I even felt an atmosphere as if she was deliberately avoiding her. My mother-in-law, who always listened attentively to what I had to say, would give vague responses or pretend not to hear when the topic of Emily came up. I was saddened by my mother-in-law's behavior, which seemed like she was ignoring my daughter, but I couldn't speak up strongly because I knew about her past. Even after 6 months since Emily was born, my mother-in-law remained the same. By this time, Emily could perfectly distinguish between people's faces, recognizing her father, who didn't have much time to interact with her due to work, and would smile at him. My husband still prioritized work, but when he had the time, he would talk to Emily and try to communicate with her, so he was delighted that she started smiling at him. Around that time, Emily started having episodes of night crying. I haven't seen many other children, so I'm not sure, but I think Emily's night crying was on the severe side. She would cry non-stop for 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the night quite frequently. I felt sorry for my husband and my mother-in-law waking up because of it, so I tried to soothe Emily in the living room or the bathroom, as far away from the bedroom as possible. However, since our house was not that big, they could still hear her. The number of times my husband and my mother-in-law mentioned that it was loud last night had increased. Although my husband is one thing, my mother-in-law usually never complained about anything, so I think this was probably the first complaint she ever made to me. I tried my best to soothe Emily, but her night crying didn't stop. Gradually, my husband and my mother-in-law seemed to become more irritable, and their way of speaking became more and more rough, saying things like, "It's so noisy," and "make her stop crying." At the end of that year, there was an important planning meeting at my husband's company. Whether his project idea would be accepted at this meeting would determine if he would be entrusted with a project in the next fiscal year. It was that kind of meeting. Knowing how important this meeting was, I planned to go back to my parents' house for 2 nights and 3 days starting 2 days before the meeting, so that my husband's work wouldn't be disrupted by Emily's night crying. I was being considerate in my own way. However, things didn't go as planned. In fact, I ended up going back to my parents' house even sooner. It was the weekend, less than a week before my husband's presentation, and he was working on his proposal at home. I had planned to go out so as not to disturb him, but it was raining heavily that day. Since I didn't have a driver's license, I hesitated to go out with Emily. If we went out in the heavy rain of December, Emily would surely catch a cold, that's what I thought. Reluctantly, I stayed at home, paying extra attention to not let Emily cry. However, she suddenly started crying. She had just had her milk, and her diaper was clean. I was playing with her while holding her, and I didn't understand why she started crying. Trying to keep the crying sound from reaching my husband as much as possible, I moved with Emily to the bathroom, the furthest place from the bedroom where my husband was working, and tried desperately to soothe her. But Emily wouldn't stop crying. Then, my husband opened the door of the bedroom and shouted, "It's too noisy. Make her stop crying now." This way of speaking was unthinkable from the husband I knew when we first got married, but this was pretty much what he had been like recently. I understand that work is important, but I thought he didn't have to speak in such a manner. I was so careful, and yet Emily started crying, and I got yelled at by my husband. I felt like crying myself, thinking. But I thought that once my husband gets a break from work, things would go back to normal. And my daughter Emily, she'll stop crying someday, right? So I tried desperately to hold back my tears. I had just fed her, thinking that I needed to do something, but then I decided to give Emily another bottle of milk. I thought, maybe if she's full, she might just fall asleep. Unfortunately, since I physically can't produce breast milk, I had no choice but to boil water and prepare formula. I couldn't just leave Emily in the bathroom while I made it, so I brought her to the living room and laid her down in the crib. My mother-in-law, who was there in the living room, frowned as Emily continued to cry and said, "Hey, when is she going to stop crying? John can't concentrate on his work, and I can't stand this noise anymore." Recently, my husband John and my mother-in-law have been acting like this. She helps with housework and talks to me, but when it comes to Emily, she doesn't touch her, and if she does, she just complains. That's how my mother-in-law has been lately. I apologized to my mother-in-law and asked her to watch Emily for a bit. I went to the kitchen and quickly prepared the milk. Even then, I could hear Emily's piercing cries. But by the time the water had cooled down and the milk was ready, the crying had suddenly stopped. I knew it. My mother-in-law did it. She got Emily to stop crying. I was touched. When I returned to the living room, just as I thought, Emily was asleep. My mother-in-law was sitting on the sofa, reading a book. When I thanked her, saying, "You're really something else. There's nothing like the touch of someone who has raised kids before," she responded, "I suppose," but she seemed somewhat brusque. I felt a slight discomfort with her response, but I was relieved that we weren't disturbing John, so I didn't pay it much mind. However, Emily did not wake up even after about 3 hours. If this continues, she won't be able to sleep at night and might start crying again. That's what I thought, so I decided to wake her up. But even when I called to her, Emily wouldn't open her eyes. When I tapped her lightly on the shoulder, she opened her eyes, but she seemed dazed, and her eyes weren't focusing properly. She was acting different from when she is usually groggy after a nap. I became worried and consulted my mother-in-law, telling her that something seemed off with Emily, but without even looking at her, she said, "It's probably just your imagination. She'll be fine." I believed my mother-in-law's words and waited for a while, but Emily's eyes never focused. Scared, I went to my husband John, who was working in the bedroom.
I know you're busy, but can you take out the car? Something's wrong with Emily. She seems completely out of it. It's strange. I'm worried. I want to take her to the hospital, please.
I pleaded desperately, but John, seemingly annoyed, said, "Are you sure it's not just your imagination? What does my mom say?"
Your mom says she's fine, but she's clearly not okay to me.
If mom says she's fine, then she must be okay. I need to finish this today, don't bother me. But I'm really worried. When I said this, John raised his voice, "Give me a break. Can't you see I'm working? I thought she finally stopped crying, and now you want to go to the hospital? Don't be ridiculous." I was so stunned by my husband's outburst that I couldn't say anything. Then, turning back to his computer, John muttered, "I never wanted a kid in the first place." His words still ring in my ears to this day. I couldn't believe my ears. It was unthinkable for John to say something like that. But I definitely saw him say it. I couldn't stop crying from the shock. I never thought John would say something like that. I left the bedroom, still crying, but when I saw Emily, my tears dried up. She was having convulsions. I thought something was wrong. Just a moment ago, Emily seemed perfectly fine, she didn't look ill at all. Panicking, I called a taxi and rushed to the emergency room. I couldn't stop trembling at the thought of something happening to Emily. When we arrived at the hospital, a pediatrician saw us right away. "There's a possibility of shaken baby syndrome," he said, and decided to do a CT scan on Emily. I didn't know about the disease, so I frantically looked it up while I was in the waiting room. Shaken baby syndrome is apparently a condition where a baby, whose neck muscles are still undeveloped, suffers brain damage due to being violently shaken. I learned that in severe cases, it could lead to death, which made my blood run cold. For a while, I was stunned and couldn't think about anything else. I don't know how much time had passed, but I was called in because the doctor wanted to discuss the results of the examination. Fortunately, Emily doesn't have any hematoma, and she's calmed down now since we've given her an anticonvulsant. The doctor said, bringing me relief. However, the doctor then said something unbelievable. "But, you know, Mom, when the nurse was undressing Emily for the examination, she found marks on her neck and shoulders that looked like they were made by an adult's fingers." I don't mean to be rude, but have you ever abused your daughter? I didn't understand what he was implying. Shaken baby syndrome is a condition that occurs when a baby is shaken vigorously. It can happen while trying to comfort them, or during play when they're being tossed in the air, and things unfortunately go wrong. We were thinking that might be the cause, but looking at those marks, it's also possible someone intentionally shook her quite hard. The doctor continued in a matter-of-fact tone. If you don't remember anything, it could have been another family member. We were able to treat her in time this round, and there was no hematoma, so she's fine. But if the same thing happens again, we can't guarantee Emily will be safe. I think you should have a serious talk with your family. I couldn't get the doctor's words out of my head even after I left the examination room. I have never abused my daughter, and I've never seen any signs of abuse on her. There were no marks on her when I changed her diaper and dressed her earlier today. I could only think that my mother-in-law must have done something while I was making Emily's milk. Emily would need to stay in the hospital for about 3 days just to be safe, so I decided to go home to get the things we needed. Did you do something to Emily? I asked my mother-in-law in a trembling voice when I got back home. Then, my mother-in-law responded, "What?" I didn't do anything, in a clearly suspicious manner. Usually, she would ask, "What do you mean? What happened? Did something happen?" But this time, she just denied it without asking anything. "Tell me the truth." As I yelled and confronted her, she finally admitted it. I just grabbed and shook her a little because she was being too noisy. "A little? The doctor said there were severe marks on her neck and shoulders. Because of what you did, Emily was in serious danger." When I said that, my mother-in-law responded nonchalantly, "Danger? But she's fine now, right? So what's the big deal?" "What? How can you say that?" I raised my voice, and at that moment, my husband came out of the bedroom. "Shut up, both of you. Keep it down," he said before slamming the door shut with a loud bang. I had sent him a message earlier, telling him that Emily was having seizures and we were going to the hospital, but he didn't ask about her condition and just complained about the noise. My husband, who did not seem remorseful at all for putting our daughter in danger. And my mother-in-law, who was unapologetic and casual about the whole situation. I had thought we had a good relationship, but it turned out I was wrong. That moment was when I lost all affection for them and gave up on this family. And then I hurriedly grabbed the bags for the hospital stay and my own belongings and left the house. Luckily, I had planned to return to my parents' house, so I had travel luggage ready and I grabbed that. In the taxi heading to the hospital where my daughter Emily was, I made up my mind to get a divorce. Some might think this is an overreaction, but for me, it was a big deal. Of course, I was furious at my mother-in-law's actions, but the main cause was my husband's behavior. I do think my husband's job is tough. The upcoming planning meeting, whether he gets selected or not, would change how fulfilling his work is for the next fiscal year. But that's not the kind of job you continue doing, neglecting the fact that your daughter has to go to the ER and is hospitalized. It's not a life-threatening job, nor is it a job that only he can do. It's about whether he becomes the project leader or the assistant. Yet, I was fed up with my husband, who is the only father Emily has, for not coming to us, let alone asking about her condition. 3 days after the admission, Emily was safely discharged from the hospital. Intending to divorce my husband, I did not return home but went to my parents' house. My husband and mother-in-law were supposed to visit my parents' house from that day, so they probably didn't think anything of it when I didn't show up. They didn't contact me. Back at my parents' house, I told them what had happened. My mom hugged Emily and me, crying, and after my dad angrily slammed his fist on the desk, he said, "You don't have to go back there. Stay here with us. I'll protect you and Emily." I broke down in tears at his words. After that, my parents and I started looking into divorce. With our layman's research, all we could understand was that divorce seemed difficult. My mother-in-law's actions weren't continuous, so it couldn't be considered abuse. If the other party contested the divorce, it seemed like it would be difficult even if it went to mediation. So, I decided to play hardball. On the 3rd day at my parents' house, I received a message from my husband, John, saying, "The presentation went well, so come back home. Let's celebrate its success." Irritated by his carefree attitude, I decided to go back home once to talk about divorce. I didn't want Emily to see John or my mother-in-law ever again, so I asked my mom to keep her at my parents' house. When I got home, John, surprised that I came back alone, finally asked, "Where's Emily? Is she still in the hospital? Is she that sick?" "Emily has been discharged. She's at my parents' house now. Why didn't you bring her back with you?" "I want a divorce." Both John and my mother-in-law were stunned. "What?
Emily was safe this time. But what if you had shaken her more violently? If I hadn't noticed and left it be, Emily might not have made it. Thinking about it, I'm scared of you. Anne."
I tried to continue pointing out John's issues when he interrupted me.
"If you are scared of my mom, we can live separately. So please reconsider the divorce."
At his words, my mother-in-law confronted him, saying, "What? You'd choose Emily over me?" Ignoring her, John said to me, "See? Isn't that okay?" I continued what I was saying earlier. "No. I am disappointed in you, John. I can't believe you said, 'I never wanted kids,' and I'm disappointed that you prioritized your job over our daughter's life. Whether we live separately from your mom or not, I can only think of divorce." When I said that, John grabbed my hand.
"No way! I was out of my mind back then because of work. I love you and Emily. I apologize, so please don't talk about divorce. I think words and actions under pressure reveal true feelings, so I can't trust you anymore. I won't divorce you even if it comes to mediation." His words made my heart race. This would be bad for me if it went to mediation. It would be difficult to accuse his mother of abuse and use it as a reason for divorce, as I had researched at my parents' house. So, I decided to tell them a lie that I had thought of at that moment. "I don't mind if it goes to mediation. But if it does, your mother might get arrested for abuse. Just be prepared for that." "What do you mean by abuse?"
His mother, who approached me with a frightening face, had no resemblance to the mother-in-law I used to like. I was suspected of abuse at the hospital. I told them I didn't do it, and I got a medical certificate. The marks on Emily's neck are also photographed. If I can prove that these hands belong to your mother, the abuse will be proven. If John insists on going through divorce mediation, I will submit the medical certificate and photos. In reality, this method had almost no effect. Even if it could be proven, it might not be considered abuse if they realized it was just a one-time incident. However, they seemed to believe it.
"That would be a problem. Please think it over again."
I have no intention of reconsidering. Besides, if you're going to file for mediation, I will comply, but I will make sure the dates are on weekdays. Can you prioritize us over your important work? John flinched when I said this. His mother was constantly begging him, "Hey, John. Please divorce her. I'm gonna get caught." For a while, John was silent, deep in thought. I added, "I will use any means necessary to divorce you. Even if it goes to mediation, even if your mother gets arrested, and even if you have to take time off work, it won't change the fact that we are getting divorced. If that's fine with you, go ahead." After thinking for a while longer, John reluctantly agreed to the divorce. Throughout the discussions about property division and child support, John repeatedly asked, "You're kidding, right? And can't you reconsider?" But I ignored all of it. In the end, we agreed to divide the assets in half and set the child support at $400 per month. My husband was reluctant to agree to the divorce until the very end, but it seemed like he finally realized my stance wasn't going to change, so he reluctantly agreed. I told him, "Feel free to dispose of all my belongings," and then I left the house. I had no intention of taking anything from that house with me. We had furniture at my parents' house, and I didn't want to remember anything about this house. As I left through the front door, I could hear John and his mother arguing. "It's all your fault, Mom. John, you said you didn't want Emily either, right? This is what you get." "What did you say?" "I covered for you so you wouldn't get caught. If you hadn't done that, we wouldn't have had to go to the hospital, and I wouldn't have had to hear all this. It's all your fault." I don't want Michelle to leave. I want you to leave. Later, I heard through the grapevine that John and his mother had separated. Apparently, they had been fighting non-stop since the incident. They were blaming each other for the divorce. Since the apartment was in John's name, his mother was kicked out and is now working in a cleaning job, being bossed around by people more than 20 years her junior. It's been a year since then, and Emily is growing up safely without any lingering effects. She's starting to learn words, calling me mom and even saying grandpa and grandma. She's getting better at many things every day. My mother is looking after her, allowing me to rejoin the workforce at a local company. With my previous experience, I was placed in the planning department, but unlike John, I prioritize my family over work. I've heard about John's situation through former colleagues. Apparently, he struggled with living alone, couldn't concentrate on his work, and the project he proposed started to fail. Eventually, John was removed as project leader and was transferred from the planning department to human resources. It's quite the ironic story. My husband, who was so devoted, got taken off the planning department, and I, who have been prioritizing our family, got assigned to it. Moreover, my work is going really well. When I brainstorm with my daughter on my lap, a ton of great ideas come to me, and I'm able to write excellent project proposals. Not just in terms of work, my personal life has also been flourishing recently. There's this single father from my workplace, and things are going pretty well between us. We first hit it off talking about our kids and have become good friends since. On weekends, we take our kids to parks or amusement parks. His 3-year-old son has taken a liking to me, and he plays with my daughter too. He's also kind to my daughter, so I want to keep seeing him. I've just got divorced, so I'm not thinking about remarrying right away, but if things continue to go well, I hope someday I might become his wife.